At 6 a.m. on Sunday I woke up to an empty bed. My husband had vanished. A note in the fridge said, "Goodbye, I never loved you." Monday his bank app showed apartment searches and credit card bills. Instead of crying I smiled. What did I realize? At 6 a.m. on Sunday I woke up and my hand hit cold sheets where Eli always slept. For a second I thought he'd gone to the bathroom. Then I heard nothing. No shower. No coffee maker. No keys on the hook. The apartment felt too big in that quiet way it does when the power goes out and you're waiting for the hum to come back. I sat up, heart doing that fast little flutter it does before bad news. His side of the closet was open. Half his hangers were gone. The duffel bag I'd bought him for our last road trip wasn't under the bed. I walked barefoot to the kitchen, still holding the blanket around my shoulders like armor, and that's when I saw the note stuck to the fridge with one of my daughter's pink magnets. Plain printer paper folded once. 3 lines. "Goodbye. I never loved you. Don't look for me." I read it 3 times like maybe the words would rearrange into something else. My throat went dry. I wanted to yell his name so loud the upstairs neighbors would stomp, but I didn't. I stood there staring at the stupid paper and then I pulled it off and crumpled it in my fist. I remember thinking weirdly that he didn't even use a pen. Like leaving me didn't deserve ink. The first hour after that was messy. I checked every room. I called him. No answer. I texted. It went green, not blue, which made my stomach flip. I tried not to wake Maya, because she'd been up late studying for finals and she's 16 and already carries too much of my stress on her face. I sat at the table with my phone and my coffee went cold. I watched the sun come up through blinds that needed fixing, and all I could think was, what kind of person writes that and just walks out? It wasn't even the leaving that hit first. It was, "I never loved you." 6 years of marriage, the way he held my hand at my mom's funeral, the night we sat on the bathroom floor when I thought I was having a miscarriage, the dumb inside jokes about that one cashier at Kroger who always called him Buddy. I replayed all of it in my head like a video you keep rewinding because you've lost the plot. Was he acting the whole time? Or was he trying to hurt me on purpose? By late morning I'd called his brother in Ohio, his co-worker at the garage, even his old army buddy whose number I hadn't used in years. Nobody had heard from him. I didn't call the cops. I knew he wasn't missing. Missing people don't leave fridge notes. Around noon Maya came out in sweatpants and a hoodie, rubbing sleep out of her eyes. She saw my face and froze. "Mom? What happened?" I told her the simplest version. "Your stepdad left." She blinked twice. Like, left. I handed her the note. She read it and her mouth tightened in this way that made her look younger and older at the same time. She didn't cry. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She just put the paper down and said, "Okay. What do we need to do?" That's when I felt my legs under me again. Not strong exactly but present. We made a list on a yellow legal pad because that's what my brain needed. Something to do that wasn't panic. Cancel the joint credit cards. Change the locks. Tell my boss I might need to step out Monday if things got crazy. Pull his name off the lease if I could. Figure out rent. Figure out everything. By evening the shock had softened into a slow burn. I kept finding traces of him like little traps. His favorite hot sauce still in the door of the fridge. His phone charger on the couch like he'd forgotten it. The dent on the passenger side of my car from the time he backed into a pole and swore it wasn't there before. Each thing made something heavy move inside me. I wasn't just sad. I was mad in a way I hadn't let myself be in a long time. The next day I went to work like someone walking through water. I'm a billing clerk at a small medical office in Tacoma. It's not glamorous. I spend my days chasing insurance companies that don't want to pay for people's MRIs, explaining deductibles to folks who already feel sick and broke. I used to joke that I'm basically a professional apology. At lunch I opened our bank app. I hadn't looked Sunday because I was scared of what I'd see. We still had a joint account from when Eli's credit was a mess and we were trying to rebuild. He'd promised he was getting better with money. Promised a lot of things. The screen loaded and I felt my eyes narrow. There were charges from Saturday night. A security deposit for an apartment complex on Hillcrest Avenue, a U-Haul reservation, a new cell phone plan, a hotel 2 towns over. All on the card tied to our account. And then the part that made my breath stop. 3 cash withdrawals from an ATM near the casino, each for $400. I scrolled down further, down to search history inside the app. That little feature banks add when you look at mortgage tools and credit options. Studio apartments under $1,200. One bedroom with no credit check. Quick approval rentals. He hadn't vanished into nowhere. He'd planned it. He'd used my money to do it. Something in me snapped cleanly like a stick you've been bending for years. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel the panic I expected. I felt this steady, cold clarity. I sat there in the break room listening to someone laugh down the hall and I started to smile. A small smile at first, then real. Because suddenly the sentence in his note wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a weapon. And I knew exactly why he'd used it. Eli didn't leave because he never loved me. Eli left because he was drowning and wanted someone else to float on. He left because the credit card bills were piling up again and the second job he swore he'd keep for a little while had disappeared 2 months ago. He left because the IRS letter came last week and I told him we needed to sit down and deal with it together. He left because he'd been skimming cash from the garage, and his boss had started asking questions. He left because he was scared and instead of facing it, he ran. And he wanted me broken behind him. He wanted me to think I was the reason. That "I never loved you" was the oldest trick in a coward's book. If I believed it, I'd be too busy bleeding to chase him. I went back to my desk and filed for a freeze on the joint cards. I called the bank and told them my husband had emptied cash and I needed to separate everything. The lady on the phone sounded tired but kind. "I'm sorry you're dealing with that," she said. I didn't spill my whole life story, just the facts. She gave me a case number and told me where to send the note and the transaction list. After work I didn't go straight home. I stopped by the hardware store and picked up new locks. The guy in aisle 6 helped me choose a deadbolt. I must have looked rough because he asked, "You doing okay?" And I said, "Not really," and he didn't push. Just nodded like he'd been there. At home Maya was at the table with her laptop. She looked up. "You figure something out?" "Yeah," I said. I held up the bag of locks. "We're changing things." She watched me for a beat. "Are you okay, Mom?" I thought about lying. I thought about saying, "I'm fine," because that's what moms are supposed to say. But I didn't want her to learn that lie from me. "I'm hurt," I said. "But I'm not lost." That night we ate boxed mac and cheese and talked about boring stuff. Her teacher who assigns too much homework, the neighbor's dog that barks like it has a personal grudge, how the rent might go up again. In the middle of it she said, quiet, "He was never good enough for you." I laughed once, sharp and surprised. "He had good moments." "Yeah," she said. "But good moments aren't the same as being good." She went to bed early. I stayed up with my laptop and a stack of papers. I found our marriage certificate, the lease, the car title, the IRS notice, the clinic bills from my shoulder surgery last year that I was still paying off. Life doesn't pause when someone leaves. It just gets louder. The next weeks were ugly and practical. I met with a lawyer at a community legal clinic because I couldn't afford a fancy one. I filed for separation. I sent the bank what they needed. I had to tell my landlord because Eli's name was on the lease. Mr. Sand, who was a small, serious man who smelled like incense and always wore a mariner's cap. When I told him, he sighed like he'd seen it 100 times. "You want a month to month while you decide?" he asked. I nodded, bracing for a lecture. He waved his hand. "We make this easy. You pay your part, you stay. Don't worry about him." It wasn't a miracle. It was just a decent person choosing not to make a hard thing harder. But it felt like a rope thrown across a river. Eli never called. Not once. He texted Maya 3 weeks later, "Tell your mom I'm sorry." She didn't answer. Neither did I. Sorry doesn't refill accounts. Sorry doesn't sit on the bathroom floor with you when you're scared. Sorry doesn't undo a note on a fridge. One Friday afternoon, almost 2 months after he left, I got a letter from the bank. They'd reversed part of the withdrawals and 2 large charges after confirming the timeline. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to breathe. I took the paper home like it was a trophy. That night I sat on the balcony with a cheap beer, watching headlights smear along the freeway. The air smelled like wet pavement and someone's barbecue. I felt tired down to my bones. I also felt something else I hadn't felt in years. Space. Not the empty kind. The kind where you can actually hear your own thoughts. I realized I'd been living half a life trying to keep someone else steady. I'd shrunk my wants to fit around his chaos. I'd called it love because that's the word I knew. But love doesn't ask you to carry it alone. Love doesn't leave you a weapon on the fridge. Maya came out and sat beside me, her knees tucked up under her chin. "So, she said. What now? I looked at the lit windows across the parking lot, all those separate stories stacked on top of each other. I thought about the bills still on my counter, the overtime I'd picked up, the way my shoulders didn't tense anymore when I heard keys in the hall. I thought about how Sunday morning had felt like the end of my world and how I was still here anyway. How we keep going, I said. But different. She leaned her head on my shoulder. For once, my shoulder didn't hurt where the surgery scar sits. Maybe it was the beer, maybe it was the quiet, maybe it was the fact that I wasn't holding my breath waiting for a mess to walk through the door. I didn't forgive Eli. I wasn't trying to. Revenge isn't always fire and screaming. Sometimes it's clean paperwork, a lock turned new, a paycheck put into an account with only your name on it. Sometimes it's looking at a note that was meant to ruin you and realizing it's just proof you were right to outgrow him. I finished my beer, went back inside and closed the balcony door. The apartment still had dents and squeaky hinges and a sink that dripped if you didn't twist it tight. But it was ours. Mine and my daughter's. We were standing in the middle of a life that hurt, yes, but also one that belonged to us again. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to beg anyone to stay. I felt the strange, steady peace of knowing I could.